Chris McGrath for the win for the Volunteers. From 40, on the way, knuckleball. He got it!
And welcome in, everybody. I am Colin Bashnigel, your host here. You can find me on TikTok, Bash's CFB Show. Definitely going to make it a point to be more active on TikTok yet again. I was doing so great. Now I'm not doing as great, but we're going to run through this slate. Now we're going to talk about the big games, and then I do have a couple of other headlines that I want to go over that caught me off guard. So just how this works, I pick a handful of games. It's been about 8 to 18 around there, generally speaking, just games that pop out to me that I want to talk about in the preview, and I talk about them in the recap. And then I'll talk about other stories that caught my eye. So that's what we're going to do today, and we're going to start with Ohio State and Purdue. But before I get started, make sure to comment, like, and subscribe, because opinion plus discussion equals community. I want you guys specifically to comment. If you like and subscribe, that's all great. We hit 100 subscribers recently, and that's awesome. I love to see it, and I love the growth, and I appreciate every single one of you. But if you guys if you don't want to like, if you don't want to subscribe, which to like, it doesn't cost you anything. To subscribe, it doesn't cost you anything. But at the very least, comment down below your thoughts on the weekend and the takes that I have here. Because opinion plus discussion equals community. I'm trying to build a community. Share your opinion. I'll give you mine right here. And let's have a discussion. You can have that discussion on Twitch in the live stream if you can catch me, Bash_CFB. You could also find me on Twitter/X. If I get a little bit more of a following and I get more interaction with people, then I'm going to be more interactive on Twitter. I mean, that's so easy. I can pull it out and respond at a break at work, during lunch, or whatever at work. But certainly TikTok, that's the place to be. No more advertising right there. Ohio State wins 41-7. Very interested to see that goal line package that they have with Devin Brown. Now, he fumbled the ball, but you never want to fumble the ball. You got to be secure in the ball, and he's going to learn from this. But this isn't a benching type of situation. It wasn't even an unsuccessful run play. As he was making an effort play to go for his second touchdown, his arm got hit by a helmet, hand got hit by a helmet that was diving in, and it was right spot, right time for the Purdue defender, knocked it loose, and it was a turnover. Ohio State loses its turnover battle 2-0. Otherwise, it's probably a 55-7 game. Not literally, because I know that's worth 2 touchdowns in which they turned the ball over. And by the way, that 41-7, they missed the first extra point of the game. Purdue did drive the ball down the field a couple of different times, missed some field goals. They had some questions there. They also got their touchdown, but I thought the Ohio State defense was really good. Bend but don't break. That's what they've been doing all year, and that's what they did again against Purdue. Purdue had a situation before the half where they were 1st and goal from the 1, and it ended up being 4th and goal from the 22, and they missed the field goal. Albeit Purdue helped them with a holding call, but they were never getting that ball in that end zone. Never on that Ohio State defense. And I know it's just Purdue, but that's very impressive for that defense to do it as Ohio State gears up for Penn State coming into town. And I'll be at that game on Saturday. Super duper excited for that one. Probably the biggest game I've ever been to in my lifetime. The Penn State-Wisconsin Big Ten Championship in 2016 is close, but I honestly think the stakes are even higher in this one than that one. Oregon 33, Washington 36. I am very interested to see what this team looks like going forward. The Oregon Ducks, that is. But I think that they are a top 5 team still, or at the very least top 5 caliber. I think they're a playoff contender. I thought we saw a playoff caliber type of game. A lot of people ripping Dan Lanning. You're on the road. Again, I forgot to change that spread, but you're on the road at Washington, and you end up having that type of game, like the aggressiveness to go for it on 4th down when he did those 3 times that everybody's been referencing. 0 of those times I blame Dan Lanning. The one before the half, maybe a little bit more egregious than any others. He might have, should have taken the points, because it's like, well, the positive/negative, the pro and con of it. Basically, what the positive result is you score a touchdown, obviously. But the negative result is you turn it over on downs for Washington to kneel it out. But the thing is Dan Lanning knew they got the ball to start the second half. However, there was momentum, and that's the argument Joel Klatt had. I've heard many sides of these arguments. Joel Klatt was one of the big voices that I heard talking about this. I still like the call. Like, you want to go into the half not cutting the lead to 1. You want to take that lead, and you want to show confidence in your offense. And you did that with Dan Lanning's aggressiveness. And he said they're an aggressive team. He took some fault at it. He said that he would even maybe change that choice. But overall, it's like you had a situation with Camden Lewis to kick the field goal, 43 yards, not unreasonable, to win the game. And he just didn't. The good news is, if you're Oregon, you control your own destiny to make the college football playoff from here on out. All you need to do is win the rest of your games. And you're fully, and I mean fully capable of it. USC comes into town. You have to go to Oregon State, and that's going to be a tough test. That's going to be one that you could definitely win. This Oregon team is going to be favored in every single game going forward, including if these two rematch in the Pac-12 championship in a neutral site. I believe Oregon would be favored in that game. At the very least, it would be a pick 'em, but I think Oregon would probably be favored. Now, Washington, 21 missed tackles is way too much. Your defense let you down at times. And at the end of the day, when Oregon put the ball through the air, that's where I kind of question, but that's not necessarily on Dan Lanning. He's like, we're going to go for it. He's not calling the play. I thought they should have leaned on their crutch a little bit, which was running the ball with Bucky Irving and Jordan James in this game. They didn't lean on that as much, and they were able to throw the ball with some success. This Washington defense shows me a lot of concern. I believe that Caleb Williams and USC will light up this Washington defense, and we're going to have an all-time classic shootout between USC and Washington. But USC's defense is kind of playing better, and we'll talk about USC here in a little bit. I'm looking ahead here, and though people are falling in love with Washington, and though, again, I'm going to say this, they are the most impressive team in America to me, just because of how unstoppable that pass game is. It's going to put them in every single game. I can't say that anybody has a trait that could win every single game against anybody in the country the way that Washington does. So we'll talk about that more in my top 25. But that defense is a concern, and I could definitely see Washington tripping up before making a hypothetical Pac-12 championship rematch against Oregon. But I think they should be favored still to do that. Now, that one loss, if they lose to USC, they just have to hope that either a three-way tiebreaker, unlike last year, goes their way, or USC loses twice in conference. USC Washington needs to be Oregon's biggest fan the following week if that were to happen. And that's a scenario we'll break down. But guess what? If you are a Husky fan, you guys root for yourself to take care of business. Take care of business against Arizona State this weekend. You are rooting so hard for Utah to beat Washington or beat USC this upcoming week. That is a big game for Washington Husky fans, for Oregon Duck fans too. But for Oregon fans, you're just like, we control our own destiny. In my opinion, Washington putting on tape what they did makes them a little bit more susceptible and more unlikely to make the Pac-12 championship than Oregon. I believe Oregon still thinks they're in the driver's seat. They just have less margin for error. Texas A&M 13, Tennessee 20. I said this is a must-win for Jimbo Fisher. It feels like a must-win for Jimbo Fisher. I think it's done, mainly because I look ahead at what Texas A&M has here, and 4-3 wasn't going to cut it here because the ceiling right now is 8-4. There is no way they're going the final 5 games of their season with the schedule they have ahead, with still having to play LSU and Auburn and Ole Miss, that they're going to be able to not lose one more game. And then you're going 8-4 again. And 8-4 is not necessarily bad if Texas A&M can somehow accomplish that, because I think the most likely record for the Aggies right now is 7-5. I think that's probably the most likely baseline. I think the most unlikely is 9-3 winning out the rest of their 5 games. This Texas A&M team needed to win here in Neyland Stadium for Jimbo Fisher's job, because I believe 8-4 is going to get him fired. I believe they're going to buy out his contract and hire somebody who can put that talent in the right spot to succeed. This isn't a Texas A&M roster that needs flipped. This is a Texas A&M roster that needs the right hands on the wheel. And I'm not necessarily even blaming Jimbo Fisher for any of these 3 losses early in the season. I feel like it's too little too late. Their offensive line is not where it needs to be. Their secondary, their defense is not where it needs to be. And if you guys remember, specifically in the secondary, they got damaged in the portal because of the culture being broken last year when they started losing. Why did they start losing? Because that offense was abysmal. But that defense for Texas A&M was great. And though the defense played okay, the rush defense had been good, they got ran all over against Tennessee. And in other games, other teams have been, like Miami and Alabama, have been able to kill them with the deep ball, kill them with the big play through the air. This Texas A&M team, unless they somehow win out, which I just said is the most unlikely record for Texas A&M that's realistic besides 3-9 or whatever it would be, 4-8. Pardon me, I don't know why I said 3-9. That's not possible. Texas A&M is going to fire Jimbo Fisher with an 8-4 record, even if they close out on a hot streak. And I think that the most likely finish is 7-5, and I think they're going to get rid of him. Tennessee, I want to highlight this. Josh Heupel's defenses were brought to question last year. He questioned it for sure after the South Carolina game. Boy, do they look like a different defense. And they honestly need it, because if they had the same defense as last year, I promise you they'd be 500 right now. I promise you they would not be 5-1. They would have 2 more losses on their resume, at least one. And that's where we're going to sit with this. That's where we're going to be. Tennessee's defense, and specifically their disruption, is the reason why Tennessee is 5-1 and still looked at as the second best team in the East. Whether they should be or not, or whether they are the second best team or not in the East, that is their throne to be taken away by a Missouri, for example, which is probably the next on deck after beating Kentucky. Watch out for Tennessee's defense, man. This is going to be an intriguing third Saturday in October matchup between Alabama and Tennessee for sure. How about this intriguing matchup? Boy, Wisconsin fell apart. So Braylon Allen out after Ches Malusi out, and then Tanner Mordecai goes down, and now their offense is all of a sudden depleted. They have basically nothing, and you got Ohio State coming into town in 2 weeks, and you don't really know how your offense is going to be able to move the ball against Ohio State. And they certainly could not move the ball against Iowa. The one touchdown was a long touchdown run by LaShawn Williams. It was a big-time play for Iowa, but that's all they needed to win. They had a safety as well that really iced this ball game away. I believe they were up 10-6. Then they went up 12-6, and then they got a field goal to make it 15-6. And, I told you guys Wisconsin would not be able to cover. I told you guys Iowa's defense is good enough and Wisconsin would struggle to move the ball. I did not expect for them not to be able to put points on the board whatsoever. This Iowa defense was legit, but Wisconsin offensively certainly concerning, and it's really injury concerns. Like, for as critical in the offseason as I was of Wisconsin's ability to completely flip the script on offense, and I was right. I'm taking that as a win on my part. This performance right here is injury-based. They are just not healthy at any position but the position that I put them in question about, which was wide receiver. They're actually healthy at wide receiver, and Will Paulding is playing good. Bryson Green is playing good, but now they don't have that distributor to throw them the rock. And Iowa, all of a sudden, driver's seat in the West. It's not by a wide margin because they did lose to Penn State. But the fortune that you have with Iowa is I believe you have margin for error because as long as Ohio State doesn't screw it up in a hangover spot against Wisconsin after the Penn State game, regardless on if Ohio State loses or wins this upcoming weekend, as long as Ohio State takes care of business against Wisconsin, Iowa is comfortably in the driver's seat in the West right now, where they can drop a game against a team they're not supposed to. Now, the thing about Iowa and the thing with you guys, Wisconsin, even if you lose to Ohio State, you still have hope to win the West, because guess what? This Iowa offense is so bad to the point where they could drop any game in the West. They could drop to Northwestern. They could drop to Minnesota. They could drop to Nebraska, especially later in the season when these teams are playing better. And they have Maryland on the schedule. That's not going to be a cakewalk. In fact, I think Maryland is probably better on a good day. Of course, they played poorly on Saturday against against Illinois. But on a good day, Iowa is not a better team than Maryland. So, yeah, the Western picture is definitely mucked up a little bit. Maybe somebody in the other five, like in Illinois, can get hot. If Illinois beats Wisconsin this upcoming week, maybe they can enter their name in the chat. But for right now, Iowa's cleanly in the driver's seat for the Big Ten West, which is ugly, by the way. 38-21 here. Kansas State's offense explodes. This was a pretty close game for a while, and Kansas State ran away with it in somewhat of a similar fashion that they ran away from UCF. I think this was against a better team, even though the record doesn't show that with Texas Tech. I still think Tech is a pretty solid team, and they're probably going to go like 7-5. I think they're going to make a bowl game, but Kansas State showing up big. This was a really tough road test for them. They battled adversity in this game. The offense absolutely showed up, and they played well. And that's all you want from Chris Kleiman's squad after getting that loss on the road to Oklahoma State, who don't look now, is all of a sudden playing really inspired and great football with Mike Gundy. Why do we doubt Mike Gundy? That team's 4-2. We thought that this season was over after they got smoked against South Alabama, but South Alabama turns out to be a pretty decent Group of 5 team, and Oklahoma State's figuring things out because they beat Kansas, the cross-state rival of Kansas State, as well in Stillwater. A tough place to play. Great bounce back for Chris Kleiman with back-to-back road games, winning the second of back-to-back road games. Massive for Kansas State to try to stay in the Big 12 race. I said this was an elimination game. I stick with that. Kansas State is still alive in the Big 12. Wyoming 27, Air Force 34. I ranked Air Force number 20 last week, and they're going to be in my rankings. But this was an amazing game. Wyoming is such a good team. Being able to beat Fresno State the way that they were, being able to beat Texas Tech the way that they did, and being able to also take Texas to the fourth quarter the way that they did, nobody should be anything but impressed with what Wyoming has done with that 5-2 resume. They are borderline a top 25 2-loss team out of the Group of 5 because of how tough their schedule's been. But hey, now, Air Force actually played somebody with the pulse, and they didn't kill them. But this is a very good Wyoming team, and Air Force guts out a victory against Wyoming at home. They did not cover, but that's okay. This spread was way too big to begin with. Air Force is a really good football team who is going to be favored in the rest of their football games. I don't know if they're going to win every single game. They have Navy coming up, and you never know what's going to happen to the Commander-in-Chief trophy. But I'm pretty confident Air Force is going to be able to win that game against Navy. I'm pretty confident they should be able to beat Army. And, you know, we'll see what the rest of the Mountain West picture looks like. I want to save the Mountain West picture for a little bit later, but, man, it is heating up out in the Mountain West. USC 20, Notre Dame 48. USC's offense let them down in this game. You cannot lose the turnover battle 5-0, allow 6 sacks, 11 tackles for loss, absolutely get clamped up on the outside. Brendan Rice, nowhere to go. Michael Jackson, a decent player, but not really much to do there. This was just a rout on one side of the ball. And the one side of the ball is USC's offense versus Notre Dame's defense. That's the bottom line. USC outgained Notre Dame, and because they didn't allow Notre Dame to get over 300 total yards as a team, the offense was not good for Notre Dame. They had to settle for field goals too often. But you add the kick return, you add the scoop and score, you add the 3 picks, you add 5 turnovers and great field positioning all day, and a recipe for a blowout. And this was so interestingly similar to how I thought it would play out. I thought that this was the best corner duo in America. I still think that Cam Hart and Benjamin Morrison are the best two outside corner duos in America. What I didn't count on was Xavier Watts being a disruptor, but that's also all good. Like, they were amazing. They were spectacular on defense. They were flying everywhere, made life a living hellhole for Caleb Williams, and that was exactly what Marcus Freeman wanted. And Notre Dame's going into that bye week, the first bye week that they have. They have two, remember, because they played 8 games through 7 weeks because they played in week 0. And they're on top of the world thinking that they can run the table and get to 10-2 and make a New Year's Six bowl potentially. I know the playoff is out of reach, but hey, Notre Dame's a really good football team, and USC, I marked them 4-1 in conference. That is incorrect. They're 4-0 in conference. They're undefeated in conference play. They got 5 conference games left on their schedule in a row. They don't play on that Thanksgiving weekend. So if they can manage to get to the Pac-12 championship, which they're still undefeated, like that's the thing that people are going to miss with this is USC is undefeated in conference play. They still got to lose 2 games probably to not make that Pac-12 championship. They got to get back up and ready, and they got to be ready for revenge against the Utah Utes on Saturday. Because if they're not up for that game and they lose that game, they are not winning both the Washington and Oregon game, and they're going to get knocked out of not only the playoff race, but the Pac-12 championship race for sure. Big-time win for Notre Dame, though. Miami, Florida, 31. North Carolina, 41. What a big-time game for Amarian Hampton, the running back there. The wheels falling off of that Miami offense in the third quarter, and North Carolina pulling away from what seemed to be a great game. I think there was a time in this game where I looked up and I'm like, sheesh, like North Carolina scored like 21 straight points in a blink of an eye, and Miami's offense was just not doing anything, because I'm pretty sure Miami was up at the half 17-14. And then all of a sudden it was like 35-17 or whatever it was, 38-17 actually, I think ended up being the score at one point. Miami ends up making it closer later. They're trying a little bit desperately to get a late, I guess, cover. But overall, Miami just, the wheels fell off. And it's coaching. Again, it's halftime adjustments. And I am putting to question this Mario Cristobal coaching staff. So we got questions about the USC staff, but I'm going to save that for just a little bit of a rant in a little bit. Mario Cristobal has a lot of answers to be had. As far as North Carolina goes, though, they're still looking like a true contender in the ACC, a dark horse playoff contender. I don't necessarily buy them, but they don't have to play Florida State, and that is going to be big going forward for the North Carolina Tar Heels. They get a favorable schedule, a pretty decently favorable schedule. They have a little bit of a tough stretch at the end of the year, but overall, like North Carolina, watch out. They're a team that can definitely contend for a playoff spot. Missouri 38, Kentucky 21. They did all of this, Missouri did, with Luther Burden being absolutely clamped up in a great game plan by Kentucky's defense. And this was a great game for a lot of it that Missouri pulled away because Missouri's the better team. And I even said in the preview, I'm taking Kentucky because of home field, because of getting back up and trying to get back off the mat. And to a certain extent, that was in their favor. But I did say I thought Missouri was the better team. And that's why Missouri was ranked and Kentucky was not. It wasn't because, Missouri lost closer. I'm not lazy like that. I felt like regardless on if they won or lost this game, they were the better team. And they were able to pull away and win this game simply because they were the better team. Missouri's offense looks amazing. That defense showed up and had their experience play big time for them. And overall, Missouri, again, I'm going to say this. I've been saying it all offseason. I was saying this and people were calling me out. I was saying how Missouri is a dark horse, maybe second place. I would never call them a contender when Georgia's in that division, but they are a dark horse to be second in the division in the East. They were my pick to be second in the East, and all they basically are. Now, granted, they still have 5 conference games left, right? It is far from over. They got plenty left. They got to still play Georgia, but they also got Tennessee, right? If they can take care of business against the teams that they're supposed to beat, if they lose to Georgia, it doesn't matter. They take care of business against Tennessee. They are winning the or winning. They are placing second in the SEC East the way that I predicted. So, and right now, Missouri looks like a better team than Tennessee. Slightly, but they do. And finally, I think this is the final game. Oregon State 36, UCLA 24. This Oregon State offense is really impressive. Damian Martinez and Sean Fenwick, that duo is amazing. In the play action pass game, that DJ Uiagalelei has on the table for Oregon State, like they're really clicking on all cylinders on offense, specifically the last couple of weeks. UCLA seems kind of fraudulent. Like I said earlier, when they played Utah, their quarterback, Dante Moore, seems like a deer in headlights. I think that even against the USC team, that's a bad matchup because now, granted, that is the last game of the year, so Dante Moore is probably going to be a little bit of a different player than he is now. But Dante Moore facing all that disruption and all that pressure that USC brings to the table, that could be a disaster in that type of game. But as far as Oregon State going forward, they're just quietly sitting there 6-1. They have the one blemish in a shootout, slightly a shootout on the road at Washington State when Washington State was really clicking. Which, speaking of Washington State, 44-6, seriously. So yeah, we'll walk that line here in a second, but I just want to go over a rapid recap of what else happened on Saturday that I missed, or really over the week. Like, for example, I just want to talk about this. Colorado, what, Alec Manor absolutely ripped Travis Hunter and that defense apart in the second half. 13 receptions, 294, 3 touchdowns. Absolutely fantastic job by him. An absolute fantastic job by Troy Taylor. But man, Colorado, I went to bed 29-0. And for anybody giving anybody crap for going to bed there, A, that was like midnight Eastern when that happened or when it went to halftime. So do you really blame us? And B, they were up 29-0 and it looked like Stanford had no hope. That was terrible, Colorado. I don't even know what to say. Props to Tulane, though, for gutting out a victory in a tough, not necessarily environment, but a tough road trip on the road at Memphis on a weekday night. All right, what else happened here? Alabama barely survives against Arkansas. I'm very concerned about that Alabama team. That offense was just absolutely shut down in the second half. That was very interesting to see right there. Utah, by the way, we'll see if Cam Rising ever comes back. The offense looked a little bit better against Cal, albeit the Cal defense has been very disappointing this year. But watch out there, okay? Illinois beating Maryland, I thought was pretty big just for the confidence of Illinois and to be able to say, hey, we're not going anywhere as far as the conference race in the West goes, at least in the division. How about this? Florida 41, South Carolina 39. Epic offensive duel, where Florida, they score the late touchdown. They force the safety or take a safety as time expires, or close to expires. Yeah, it was pretty awesome. Ricky Pearsall had probably the game of his career. Graham Mertz just also had the game of his career. Like, this was absolutely a fantastic job. TCU blowing out BYU was a surprising result, but awesome to see. By the way, I just want to mention that for a quick second. Georgia State beating Marshall was also big in the way that they did it. They dominated that game against the Marshall Thundering Herd. Duke beating NC State with no passing attack whatsoever. They completed 4 passes in the entire game. And I do want to bring this up. Colorado State came back from down 30-10 with about 6 minutes left in that game. They win on a Hail Mary, or they tie the game up technically on a Hail Mary. Everybody in the stadium just freaks out, loses control, right? Including the kids on the sideline. And they're like, oh my gosh. And they didn't storm the field. They didn't like come off the bench and go crazy. No, they like went onto the field and they were just like, in a panic, like, oh my gosh, what just happened, dude? That seriously happened? And these clown refs trying to take over the dang game, trying to send the game into overtime or increase the chances of overtime or make it more interesting than it already was, like an all-time classic type of finish, trying to take control. Don't throw that excessive celebration flag on Colorado State's bench there. At least give them a warning, sideline warning or something like that. What are we doing in college football if we're getting these kids a penalty for being stunned at the fact that they came back from 20 down with 6 minutes left in the game and just One on a Hail Mary pending the extra point. They hit the extra point, no harm, no foul. But if they didn't hit that extra point and they end up losing in overtime, that is the crappiest way to lose. And it's simply because the refs can't just freaking swallow their pride and hold their flags in their dang pants. I don't know what they're doing there. That really ticked me off. Finally, coaching decisions, by the way. I talked about Dan Lanning. I felt like that situation was fine. As far as Alex Grinch goes, his defense played better, but they're still a liability. But that didn't necessarily make the hot seat even hotter, which is really hot in the first place with Alex Grinch. I think you got to just question the program that Lincoln Riley is running to see if they're conducive to play Big Ten football. I think that's the bottom line in that situation. And then finally, Miami, train wreck. No halftime adjustments, got absolutely outcoached and outclassed by Mac Brown's staff. Mario Cristobal, the way that these last 2 weeks have gone, he's probably been the more talented team in both games. They should probably still be undefeated. Mario Cristobal should be ashamed when he looks in the mirror, and he needs to find a way to do better. But guess what? He did the same crap at Oregon, so why are we surprised? We want to talk about Dan Lanning's coaching decisions. Well, the previous guy that was there was far worse than what Dan Lanning brings to the table. Rant over. Let's get back to the slideshow. I need a drink after that. Okay. Walk that line. Record's not up to date. It's up to date on the final slide. Let's just go with it, though. 1-0. Tulane won by 10. 2-0. Iowa State won outright, which I felt like that was going to happen. 3-0. Ohio State dominated the way I thought they would. 4-0. James Madison dominated the way I thought they would against Georgia Southern. 4-0 start to the weekend. Fantastic. But Maryland, Kansas, you let me down. Maryland, that was never even close. Kansas, I felt like they had a lot of chances to win that game, both offensively and defensively. Overall, props to Oklahoma State for proving me wrong back-to-back weeks. I mean, I took the under in team total points against Kansas State with. I took the Kansas Jayhawks to cover 3 points on the road in Stillwater with. So good job for Oklahoma State proving me and so many others wrong with these couple of games that they have had in a row. Georgia State dominated Marshall. I saw that coming. 5-2. Notre Dame. I said they would win by 17. Man, they outdid my expectations. 6-2. Miami UNC, that over smacked. I believe the total was 72, if I remember correctly. So that wasn't ever really close. I remember at fourth quarter it happened because I remember being like, just score and let me get this over so we can improve our record to 8-3 at that point because Colorado State and Boise State hadn't happened. Duke, -3. They completed 4 passes and still covered. I don't know what to tell you. Like, I know a little bit about football for anybody wondering. But, of course, I'm not trying to be arrogant here. I'm not trying to be prideful. It's just it feels good because with a bad record, as that's the up-to-date record, 42, 46, and 2, and that's the up-to-date record before this is inputted. So we're getting back above 500 because Colorado State covered plus 7.5. Georgia was my third loss to make it 9-3. And really, they probably should have been able to score more than that. They probably could have scored more than that, but they kind of, especially after Brock Bowers got hurt, kind of took the foot off the pedal on offense, and they were pretty close. I mean, Cash Jones broke a long run that I thought he was about to score, and I thought Georgia was about to win 44-20, and he got caught, and I was sad. But, you can't be greedy. Greedy money doesn't, win exactly all the time. 10-2 would have been awesome, but I'll take 9-3 any day of the week, especially when you're looking at this. Colorado State underdog. They won outright, okay? Notre Dame, 2.5-point favorite. They dominated the way I kind of thought they would. Georgia State, 1-point favorite. They kind of dominated. Like, I had such great reads on this. James Madison, 5.5, dominated. Iowa State, won outright as 5.5-point underdogs. I had such great reads on this. And I felt like, I'm just really confident in what I did this week. So let's talk about the top 25. I'm going to go from top to bottom because I feel like the bottom is a little bit more interesting and you can make more arguments for more teams towards the bottom. Number 1, Georgia. I'm keeping them there until they lose. I don't care if Washington has the best win. Number 2, Washington. Oh, you're just overreacting to that. I am not. I've been ranking Washington 2 for weeks. And why would I move them off of the 2 slot after beating Oregon? Number 3, Michigan. I don't need to say anything more. They allowed the first touchdown against Indiana, scored 52 straight points. Number 4, Ohio State. Looked really good against Purdue. Number 5, Oklahoma. Had a great win against Texas. Number 6, Florida State. They looked very impressive against Syracuse. I called the upset. That was one of the few things I got completely wrong on Saturday. I called the upset just feeling a little bit bold, feeling like they would sleepwalk through that game. They didn't sleepwalk. They dominated from start to finish. Syracuse is a mess. I misdiagnosed them. Number 7, Penn State. The line between 4 and 7 is razor thin. That's not a shot at Penn State. I probably should have ranked them higher just so that way people don't say, oh, you're just a Buckeye fan, Penn State hater. Like, Penn State loses on the road to Ohio State in a close game, they're not dropping super far. The worst that they're probably going to drop is 10, because I think no matter what happens, unless they just show up and lay an egg in the big game that they've been preparing for all year, they're not dropping any lower than Alabama where they are, or wherever the heck the next team up below Alabama would be. Like, they're going to be in the top 10 next week as long as they are who we think they are. And that's where Oregon comes into play. Like, they're still number 8. And the only reason they're not number 8 is because the 7 teams ahead of them are all undefeated, and most of them have pretty solid wins. The only ones that don't is Penn State and Michigan, who have been dominant in all of their wins. Like, they haven't had games that are in question. So Oregon, to me, best one-loss team in America. I have them ranked above an undefeated North Carolina at number 9, who's still impressive to me. I, again, want to see it against a little bit better of a team, but I thought about putting them at number 8. I don't want it to be premature. I'm scared to buy into North Carolina because every time we have under Mac Brown, it has not worked out. Number 10, Texas, top 10 team. They beat Alabama. They have that signature win in a very close loss against Oklahoma at the last second. Can't really blame them too much. You just got to move on. Number 11, Alabama. I like what they're doing, but that second half against Arkansas was atrocious. Number 12, Oregon State. That offense looks fantastic. Number 13, Ole Miss. Quietly sitting there. That offense is really, really, really good, with that defense looking to continue to improve. Number 14, that defense for Duke is really good. Same with Utah's. Same with Notre Dame's at 15 and 16. So that's very interesting to slide in there. A great offense, bad secondary at LSU with number 17, who beat Missouri at number 18. But other than that one blemish, like, Missouri has looked really good. They have 2 pretty solid wins against Kentucky on the road and Kansas State at home. Number 19, Tennessee. I think those 2 wins are better than any win that Tennessee has, albeit the Texas A&M win was still pretty impressive to me. I'm not completely sold out on Texas A&M to the point where I can't give Tennessee credit for that win, but the most impressive win Missouri has 2 more impressive wins than what Tennessee has, and I do think that they're just a better team. Number 20, Air Force. I think that they would give USC a lot of fits. I think that they could potentially beat USC if they played. And number 21 is USC. Again, I had them at 12 last week. They are just a team that needs to prove to me that they are a true contender in the Pac-12 for them to get ranked back up in the top 15. Number 22, Iowa. That defense is fantastic. They're ranked by a formality. They're ranked because they're 6-1 and probably going to win a Power 5 division. But that's gross for me to put them there. 23, James Madison, undefeated, but again, like, the bottom of this poll is very, very flawed and very, very gross, and this is why I finished here. Like, they only beat Virginia by 1, and Virginia's not that good of a team. Now, they're undefeated. They haven't played that tough of a schedule. They're still a really good team, and they've dominated some games that looks really impressive, but they're an interesting case study to me, and I know why the AP poll didn't rank them, but screw it. They're undefeated. Number 24, UCLA. I still think they're a pretty solid team. They got a really good defense. Dante Moore has flashed, but in the big games, he just kind of disappeared. I mean, he showed up against Washington State good enough, but the other 2 games against Oregon State and Utah, he did not look good. Number 25, Louisville. I still think they're a really good team. I felt like they sleptwalked through that Pitt game completely, and I think they're going to bounce back, and I think they're going to win some games. Washington State, I did consider to put them in over Louisville, but I need to see them bounce back. Losing the way that they did against Arizona, getting ran all over, getting thrown all over, everything was working against them in that game at home, though. And that's what's most embarrassing about them. They lost 44-6 against Arizona at home. I still think they're a very solid team, but that's a really, really embarrassing loss. Tulane, I considered after a big win, quietly sitting there with just the one loss to Ole Miss. Liberty, undefeated, quietly, probably going to run the table if they can beat Western Kentucky. They look great. They dominated that second half against Jacksonville State. UNLV, watch out now. They got a fun offense. One of the funnest offenses in the group of five. Most fun. Sorry. Wyoming, they're still a really good team. They're a 2-loss team. They're better than Fresno State. They proved that on the field. They kind of beat them better than the score indicated. And Fresno State, I consider too, because that's their only loss. They have looked pretty solid this season. Heisman, you'd be dumb not to rank Michael Penix Jr. number 1, the quarterback at Washington. Number 2, Dylan Gabriel with that big-time moment. Number 3, Caleb Williams. He's a defending Heisman Trophy winner, but he does not have that big-time moment. I guess his Heisman-ish moment is how he concluded against Arizona. But he looked terrible, and honestly, he probably should be off, but the list is very – man, you could think that I'm the biggest Pac-12 fan in the world after looking at this list. The depth of Heisman contenders is just not there. Who do you want me to put there? J.J. McCarthy as a formality, he doesn't have the numbers or it has impressed me. So I'll keep Caleb Williams there at 3 and Bo Nix at 4. I probably could have flipped those, but again, Caleb Williams is Caleb Williams. I'm going to give him some respect, and that was the first game I've ever seen him play like that in his career, so I'll pass. And then 5, I got Jonah Ellis. He is the best pass rusher in America so far, at least the most productive. He is constantly in the backfield. He harassed Dante Moore for 3.5 sacks. He was all over that California backfield as well on Saturday. Jonah Ellis, I don't think he's going to get any Heisman love or anything like that. But like I said, this is a real thin Heisman conversation that you could have. It's pretty much a 2-man race at this very moment, with Michael Penix Jr. as a clear favorite, Dylan Gabriel as that next guy up. We're still waiting for some other guys to step up. A lot of big games to be had for J.J. McCarthy, Marvin Harrison Jr., Drew Allar, or anybody for Penn State. I don't really think Allar would be that guy, but you never know. I mean, you never know. We still got half a season to play. Somebody can emerge, especially if Michael Penix Jr. in this offense kind of gets caught by a couple of these teams in the Pac-12. Well, that'll do it for me today. I really appreciate you guys coming in and tuning in for that long show, but I think that it would be worth it in the end. So thank you guys for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Have a great week. Enjoy some football, and we'll